Welcome, everybody, to the Heat and Magic Assist podcast. I am your host, Carson, and I am joined by my two buddies, David and Steven. What's up, guys? Today, we're going to have some news about the NBA, and we're also going to talk about what happened with the Magic and the Heat lately. So first, we're just going to start off with some news. Steven, why don't you start us off? What do you want to
Sure.
talk
Thanks, Carson. This isn't really news. I just wanted to bring up and talk about Carmelo Anthony. I believe the last podcast we gave him a hard time. I myself never expected him to do that well for the Portland Trailblazers when they brought him on.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, he's been off for a year. He's a little past his prime, and I wasn't really sure
Stat.
how much he could score like he used to in the past, and which is why they brought him in. The Portland Trailblazers have been hit with a bunch of injuries. They're having a hard time scoring points, and so they brought in a scoring specialist who unfortunately has been past his prime for quite a few seasons, in my opinion. But to my surprise, he's been playing pretty well in the past week. As
Oh
some
yeah.
of you might know by now, he was named the Western Conference Player of the Week, and he averaged about 22 points a game last week, which is pretty surprising and a pretty good clip. I do need to point out, however, that a lot of these points came against inferior teams that are below 500. Particularly, they played the Chicago Bulls twice and then Oklahoma City. Now, last night they did play the Clippers, a much better defensive team with defensive specialists like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and you can see that his productivity was not as good. But we still got to give him a lot of credit. Being able to average that many points and getting that many shots, I think is very significant. And it's not just about the performance that Carmelo's putting, but I think it's important to note that the Portland Trail Blazers are really 100% behind Carmelo. That's what's important to point out because given his recent history, like I just discussed, you wouldn't expect the Trailblazers to give Carmelo 20 shots a game, which he did against the Bulls, or 16 shots, 15 shots, 15 shots before that. So they're really putting a lot of faith into Carmelo and giving him 100% confidence to just go out and play as much as he can and do what he can on a daily basis. And I think it's important to point that out. So yeah, I'd like to hear what you guys what they think.
Yeah, I think the confidence is important. They, unlike with Carmelo Anthony's stint with the Rockets, they're not forcing him to shoot three. They are letting him play his game, shoot the mid range, post up and do a fadeaway jumper. Like they are letting him play his game, play to his strength, and it is working out so far. And I think it's pretty impressive for Carmelo Anthony to miss the whole season last year. And he truly showed that he still belongs in this league. He still got some game left in him. And he could still contribute. I think that's impressive. And he there's like multiple times during the Chicago Bulls he was able to just drive it in for a dunk and a layup. I just didn't think he had that speed in him anymore.
Oh, guys, are you serious? We're actually really going to talk about this. Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah, man.
It's not an issue of whether or not he has game left in the tank. It's an issue of whether or not he's willing to come off the bench. Is he okay with that?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he learned a lot from almost being banished from the NBA.
Yeah, I don't think he has a lot of. I think you understand he doesn't have a lot of choices. If he wants to stay in the NBA, he needs to accept a role besides being the star player. And given the many times that he's been trying to get into teams and being on TV and talking about how he's accepted his position as an older player, being a role player, coming off the bench, and being off for a whole year and finally getting the chance to do it. I think if the Portland Trail Blazers does finally get healthy and decide to put him on the bench, I think he'll be fine with it. Now the problem is, I don't know how efficient he will be once he is put in that position. As much as he may be willing to be to play off the bench, he won't get as many shots. I don't think. I don't think he'll be given the green light as much as, for example, like Lou Williams gets from the Clippers, right? Even though Lou Williams is a bench player, he shoots many shots to be able to produce like he does. If Carmelo goes to the bench and the Portland Trail Blazers are asking him to score with a lesser amount of shots, I don't know how efficient he could be because he is a volume shooter. He needs to get those many shots off to be able to produce. Which brings a whole nother topic of why do we even have these sorts of players? Because there's a lot of these players that need to score. They need a lot of shots to score. But that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I see
I
him.
guess that's my point. If you're gonna let Carmelo Anthony get like 15 shots a game coming off the bench, why wouldn't you just give that to a younger player? And
They don't.
he
They
has.
don't have
You already
another
know what
shooter.
Carmelo has.
Well, I guess just to point things out, maybe you're not familiar with his what's going on with Portland. The Portland has a lot of injuries, and so Carmelo's not even coming off the bench right now. He's a starter. So he's playing as a starter with starter minutes because they just don't have enough bodies to be able to produce on the offensive end. So that's why he's getting a lot of shots.
Replacing Mario Hezonja, who's giving them nothing offensively.
Oh, Mario Hezonja.
So he's literally the Trailblazers' third option behind CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard.
Yeah, and Rodney Hood has been struggling too.
Man. No.
They're
not worth me paying attention to. I really don't care about the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah,
we'll see how they translate when they play against, more winning teams, not against these sub 500 teams.
And how about didn't they play? Did they play Clippers yesterday?
Yes.
They got stomped on.
Yes, it was a pretty bad loss for the Trailblazers. So the Clippers played pretty well. Carmelo didn't do too well. He went 2 for 9, so that's 22% on the field goal. But like I mentioned before, that's going up against defensive specialists like Kawhi and Paul George, and they're obviously on their physical prime right now, and they're just a better team overall.
Okay, now let's move on to our next topic, which is my topic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, not the Heat, but the Houston Rockets played the Spurs yesterday on December 3rd. When the Rockets played the Spurs, the game went to overtime and the Spurs won. But during the last 8 minutes of regulation in the fourth quarter, a dunk which was a dunk and there was no travel or anything that James Harden made was called a miss because the ball flew out and the ref thought he missed it. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if they counted that dunk, Houston probably would have won that game. And especially in the Western Conference, every win is very important in such a stacked conference like that. I just ask you guys, do you think the NBA should allow them to replay those last 8 minutes of regulation? Because they have done it before.
Mm-hmm.
But it was
the Miami
last
Heat.
time they did that, was with the Heat and the Atlanta Hawks. 10 years ago, I think. It was a long time ago. And during that time, I think they played the last 2 minutes of regulation to determine the outcome. Do you guys think that the NBA should allow the Rockets and the Spurs replay the last 8 minutes of that regulation to determine the winner?
Can you elaborate more on that precedence where the Heat and the Hawks play the game again? I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not really sure they ever did that. But if it happened, can you elaborate on that?
So, this is going to go with my opinion, but I don't think that redo for the Miami Heat against the Atlanta Hawks in 2008, I don't think that relates to this game. Only because in that game, what happened was I think the scorer incorrectly gave Shaq too much foul, incorrectly gave him an extra foul, and Shaq fouled out of the game when he shouldn't have. And so that's why they redid the game, because of a scorer mistake, not a ref mistake. So they actually replayed that game. So that's what happened. But in this game, it was a ref mistake. It wasn't a score table mistake. And so that's why I don't think it's comparable. And not only that, but the refs, they always make mistakes. even when when the coaches challenge the refs like call, and it seems like it's obviously the refs are wrong, they still won't overturn the call, and like the NBA still gives out these reviews, the last review of the last 2 minutes of the game, and they say which of these foul calls or rulings were correct and which ones were incorrect, and they don't redo games for that either. So no, I don't think they should replay this game. And not only that, but that controversial play happened with 7 minutes 50 seconds. Like the Rockets had plenty of opportunity to make up. This wasn't like a last second play or like in the closing minutes. There's still plenty of time left.
Yeah, I completely agree with David. Completely agree.
I completely agree with that. But some people are thinking that they should replay that game only because that conference there in the West is just every win is very important to determine seeding. I mean, look at how many teams are. I mean, right now most of the teams are injured, but if you look at how the record was, I mean, any of like the 10 teams can make the playoffs right now.
I can't agree with their reasoning because that's implying that if the Rockets and Spurs were in the Eastern Conference, they wouldn't think about even playing the game again. It's just special circumstances for a situation that shouldn't be measured by special circumstances. They should be based on if this were to happen again, this is how we're going to act on every single time. And like David said, it's just a ref miscall. Just kind of like miscalling a foul. You have plenty of opportunities they have plenty of time to realize that, like, okay, we're down 2 points, you know. Like, they weren't down 2 points at the time, but those 2 points didn't count, and so they need to just get over and move on. And what I believe, if I remember correctly, when I saw the score, the Rockets were ahead by a decent amount of points, and they ended up losing the game. So clearly, it's not the refs' fault if they're already ahead in the game. Clearly, they lost because they had a big mental fault from that incident, and I would just blame them for letting the Spurs come back because of that incident. It's ludicrous to think they would play the game over again just because
they went to overtime, didn't they? You can tell the whole overtime as well.
It's ludicrous.
That's what I'm asking. Well, because I can care less about James Harden. I'm not a James Harden fan, so I really don't care. If he loses, it's better for me. I enjoy that. But it's just the premise. The premise, should they be allowed to redo that game?
No, because refs miss calls all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, and they review it. There's an actual report, unbiased report that goes out after the game is over saying, oh, the ref missed this call. This call is incorrect. They don't redo the game for that.
I would point, I mean, I know you guys are talking about that missed call for the refs, but I want to save that for when we talk about the Heat. I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that, if you guys agree with that. But, I mean, they shouldn't deserve it. They don't deserve it. It's fine.
No.
All right. So anything you want to talk about, David?
Yeah, it's just something that happened after our podcast last week, and that was about the Orlando Magic. For those who don't know, Orlando Magic during this past off season, they stretched Timofey Mozgov's salary. He was actually on a 1 year, I think, $16 million salary, and they stretched him to $5.5 million over the 3 years. And I think it was back in October. They applied for this exception. What this exception is a career-ending injury exception, saying that Timofey Mozgov can't play basketball anymore because of his injury, and so because of that, his salary could come off their books, won't count against their salary cap. And so, for those who don't know, Timofey Mozgov is actually in Russia right now. He's trying to. He signed to a Russian team, but he actually has not played a game yet because of that. I think it was a knee injury. It's interesting that the NBA decided that even though he signed to a team that, oh, yeah, this is a career-ending injury and his salary is not count against their Orlando Magic cap, which they will need because his salary is $5.5 million stretched over 3 years. I think where this counts is during the 2021 season. All the Orlando Magic, I would say, top rookies, including, young players, Mo Bamba, Markelle Fultz, and Jonathan Isaac, they're all restricted free agents. So that $5.5 million could really help them retain all three. And I think it erased a blunder that the Orlando Magic did by instead of just holding on to Timofey Mozgov and just kept his 16 million expiring contract. I think they should have done that instead. But it worked out in the end. And it's really interesting. It just leads to so many more opportunities for the Orlando Magic in the future, and just what can they do with their pending free agents, including Evan Fournier, who has a player option, 17 million.
Oh
And
God.
well, if he, it's questionable right now. Should he pick it up or not? And if he doesn't pick it up, should the Magic re-sign him? I'm thinking no, but then again, they do have 5.5 million more to spend around. And also, the Miami Heat used the same exception for Chris Bosh a few years ago for his blood clots.
Very interesting. I think the Magic is gonna have a very interesting few new upcoming seasons trying to figure out their roster given all the young talent they have with their ending rookie contracts. So
yeah, I mean this gives them that 5.5 million could possibly give them they're probably gonna give a max offer to Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz, and so.
Oh dear God.
And that's on top of paying Nikola Vujovic about $25K a year, Aaron Gordon $18K a year, Terrence Ross $14K. So that's a lot of money they're gonna try to pay off to the other players.
Oh yeah, that 5.5 mil is very crucial.
All that money just to be subpar. It reminds me of the Heat when they signed James Johnson, Dion Waiters, and who else? Tyler Johnson. I feel bad for their Magic. But I digress. Since we're talking about Orlando Magic, okay, Steven, anything else you want to talk about the Magic?
I'll go over their weekly, how they did in the past week.
Tell us.
They have 4 games this past week since last Wednesday, and they went 3-1.
Ooh,
two of those 4 games were away, which they won. So their first 2 away games were won this past week. So I believe they're 2-7 on road games. Their only loss during this 4-game span was to the Toronto Raptors, which was played here in Orlando. And that's another point to point out. They played some rather subpar teams. Wednesday they played Cleveland, and then Sunday they played Golden State, and yesterday they played Washington. And despite them playing these lower tier teams, it's a good sign for Magic fans because they were able to win these games as they should, even though they didn't have
to win the games. You gotta win the games that you're supposed to win.
Exactly, and I think that solidifies them as a mid-tier team who's trying to get a playoff spot. Yeah. Whereas think about the Orlando Magic 3 years ago, they were clearly with those teams. They was barely winning any games at all. So. And it's important to point out that they were able to get those wins without their best player, Nikola Vujovic. And Aaron Gordon got back on that game against Toronto. Unfortunately, he has not been playing well since. He struggled during that comeback game, the following game as well against Golden State. Those 2 games, he literally made 8 points per game on 2 for 11. So the same field goal percentage. And he did a little better yesterday against Washington. But still, you could tell that he's not the same player like he was last year in the playoffs when he played Toronto. He was the Magic's best player by far when they played the Toronto Raptors, and it's kind of hard to see if he's ever going to get to that point again.
But it's something up with him. I think he's like averaging career lows this season.
I heard rumors that he's having concussion issues, which. It's hard to kind of put that in rationalize why that would be happening right now because he had some concussion injury about 2 years ago, and it's hard to see that lasting all the way through now, given that he's performed well since. It's not like he's been on a downturn since that first injury. It's hard to tell what's going on with Aaron Gordon. It could be just the beginning of the season. We know that some players, they don't really put a lot of effort into the beginning of the season. They're saving themselves for the playoffs. I could definitely see that being an option. And I know we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler coming up. I kind of think that's a theory for him as well that applies to him. But anyways, Aaron Gordon's he has come back from injury and he hasn't been doing too well, but we'll keep an eye on him. And so during that 4-game span, the Orlando Magic's offensive rating is at 26 rank. Obviously, they're not a very good offensive team. They're averaging about 102 points a game, which puts them at 29th. And their pace per game is 28. So not only, obviously, they're not scoring much. And it's not just because of I don't think it's just because of their players, but also because of the pace that they choose to play in. They play a very slow half-court game. And they don't score much at all anyways.
Yeah.
But where they thrive is their defense, obviously. So they're in the 8th seed in the East right now at 9-11. And what's carrying them to that spot is because they have a very good defense. Mm-hmm. Right now, their defensive rating is 105, so they're 11th in the season right now. But their opponent's points per game is at 2nd. So, and that's partially due to the pace as well, because the pace is slower. Both teams don't get to score as much. They just don't get as many possessions. Yeah. But also attributes to the defense.
Vukovic, he's not a fast player.
Yeah, you guys need to play. They need to play half court set with Vukovic.
Yeah,
but he hasn't been playing, and they haven't sped up the game at all, even though he's been away. So like I was saying before, even though the Magic they're playing against lower tier teams besides Toronto, those wins are very important to solidifying themselves as a playoff contender. I'm sorry, not a playoff contender, but contending for a playoff spot. During that run, it's important to point out that even though I think we all agree that we're not fans of Evan Fournier, during those 3 wins, he averaged at least 30 points a game.
Oh, come on, David,
so
please.
He's been carrying the Magic on the offensive load.
He's been carrying the Magic, okay.
Yes, he has. And it's important to point that out. We got to give credit where it's due. And even when they played Toronto, he didn't score efficiently, but he still put up 19 points. And he was at a 32% field goal percentage, but he was 12 of 14 from the free throw line. So what that tells me is that if you watch the game, that even though his shots weren't falling in, he realized that he needed to change his game, and so he attacked the basket more and getting those foul calls. So he's trying. He's not just trying to put up shots and, hopefully they go in. He's analyzing the game, putting up shots where he's getting a better percentage at. So you could tell, on those 30-point game nights, he was shooting pretty well from threes and long-range jumpers.
They're only 3-point threat. So.
Yeah. And when they played Toronto, though, with that perimeter defense, he realized the shots weren't going in, so he was driving to the basket and getting to the foul line. Mm-hmm. So you got to appreciate him for that, because he's really carrying the Orlando Magic on the offensive end. And so I just want to put some closing remarks on the Magic at this point in the season. They need to figure out their offense to be more consistent. Right now, with Aaron Gordon back, they really need him to at least be consistent. Maybe not score 20 points a game like a lot of fans would want him to score, given his youth, athleticism, and like a couple years back, he had a pretty good start to the season, and last year's playoff, he was doing pretty well. And so fans want him to get that sort of spark as a captain of the team. But I think even if he just became more consistent on a lower pace, like maybe 14, 15 points a game, that would do wonders for the Magic. He just needs to get consistent. He's trying to figure that out, while Nikola Vujovic is out too. The younger players can be more assertive in the offensive end as well, take more shots, especially like Fultz has been more aggressive to driving into the basket, taking shots. Jonathan Isaac as well. Even Mo Bamba in some games, he's been shown to take more.
There were some career games for some of those players. Like Markelle Fultz had his career high 20 points yesterday against the Wizards. Yep. And I think even Mo Bamba had a career game against Cleveland, I believe. He made like 5 threes.
Come on, man. It's the Wizards. They're the worst defensive team in the NBA. They're 30th in defensive rating.
Hey, you said last week, all right, good teams beat the teams they're supposed to beat. So
that's true. But but it doesn't apply when we're talking about the Magic.
So the thing is, the thing is, they want these younger players to be more confident because they're going to be very important, not only for the postseason, which they're hoping to make, but in the years down the line. I see Jonathan Isaac and Markel Fultz as being the cornerstone of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, if Aaron Gordon doesn't propel himself to at least a all-star level candidate, they're probably going to trade him.
They need to trade him. I
Yeah.
really think so.
And so then the Magic are going to have to fall back on having these younger players be the new key pieces for the franchise. So I think it's important for Magic fans to keep a lookout and just try to have an open mind as far as having these younger players put up more shots, even though they might not make them as much. And also as well for Aaron Gordon. We don't really know what's going on with him, but hopefully he'll get back to his.
I think he's forcing it. Like he's trying to be the number one option, but that's not really his play style.
It feels like he has these bursts of like just taking a bunch of shots, and then you don't see him again for the rest of the game. And it's kind of like a weird pace. It doesn't feel like he has a feel for like the game on the offensive end as a whole.
He's not playing to his strengths. I don't think so.
A lot of shots.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of bursts, longs. Yeah, he's super athletic. You think he used that athleticism a little bit more, and we all know that players like Blake Griffin, who were super athletic, they dominated down low with dunks and just jumping over people. And it's not that Aaron Gordon has to do the same, but if he's literally only taking long-range jump shots, it just becomes a very one-dimensional player and easier to guard. But like I said, he's shown to be a little bit more all around during the playoffs last year, so we'll see how he turns out. I just think it might be some sort of health issue that hasn't been put out to the public yet. I did want to do a quick point out about the injuries plaguing the Magic. So I don't know if you guys heard, Al-Farouq Aminu will be out indefinitely with a torn meniscus in his right knee.
Oh God!
And the Magic are trying to figure out if they can treat the injury without surgery. Aaron Gordon returned against Toronto last week. Michael Carter-Williams just returned last week as well from a hip injury. And Nikola Vujovic is still improving faster than expected, and he'll be reevaluated in about a week. And then we'll see where he goes from there. They have an interesting schedule. Tonight they're playing Phoenix, which I think will be a good test for them. Phoenix are a pretty good team. They're a decent team right now. They're trying to go for the 8th spot in the West. They're a little sub 500 right now, so I think it'll be a good gauge against them for the Magic. I think they're about the same tier, and so it'll be good for both teams to kind of gauge themselves to see how good they are and if they're really at that playoff spot, that 8th spot in either conference. And then after Phoenix on Wednesday, they're playing the Cleveland Cavaliers on Friday. They should win, even though it's in Cleveland again. I expect them to win.
Yeah.
And then it gets a little tougher after that. So after Cleveland, they're going to go to Milwaukee. And then after that, they're going to play the Lakers at home.
Yeah.
And the rest of the December schedule looks pretty tough. They're playing some pretty rough teams. So just a few teams that you might see the Magic playing would be Houston, the Jazz, the Nuggets, Portland, the 76ers, Milwaukee again. So they're playing Milwaukee twice during December. And then some of the lesser teams is the Bulls and the Hawks. If the Magic can come out 50% of those games being won, I think they'll be pretty successful because I don't see them winning a lot of those games against the higher level tier teams like the Lakers and the Rockets and the Bucks, especially the Bucks. It's a horrible matchup for the Magic.
I know one Florida team that beat the Bucks, and they beat the Bucks at home at their home court. I think it was. I remember. It was the Miami Heat. Definitely wasn't Orlando Magic. The Miami Heat are also the only team that gave the Bucks their first loss at their home court. And also yesterday, the Miami Heat are also the first team to bring the Toronto Raptors their first loss at home in overtime in a nail biter.
Yeah.
With Jimmy Butler scoring 8 points in overtime, leading everybody. the whole Jimmy Butler thing, I don't know if like people like know how important he is to the Miami Heat, because the last 2 seasons the Miami Heat have lost so many close games because they don't have
Yes.
anybody to like just give the ball to and just say, get the hell out of my way, I'm gonna like bring us to victory. Like they had nobody who can do that.
I think the
Like
Brooklyn Nets game is a great example
yeah,
of that.
Brooklyn Nets, oh my god. And it also shows why, even though Brooklyn's a good team, they need that one dude to like be able to bring them the victory. They were up. They were
Yeah.
up 5 points.
Well,
They were
well,
up
yeah,
five.
well, Spencer Dinwiddie missed
Yeah.
a layup in the closing minute that would have gave them the lead. I think I was pretty lucky about the Heat. Very
He did
fortunate about the
score
Heat.
29. He did score 29 points.
Yes, but he
played
was
well.
their go-to player for the Brooklyn Nets possessions, and he couldn't finish it. He wasn't clutch to put them over.
He also messed up on the last possession.
Yeah, he also did that.
He
But
messed up.
But the most crucial one was
wasted way
missing
too
that
much time.
layup.
Yeah, for sure. Although he wasting that time in that last possession wasn't a good idea either.
Mm-hmm.
Like he should have just, the minute he got the ball, he should have just went up and tried to go for the shot instead of dribbling it, dribble, and then try to like get a better shot.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Spencer Dinwiddie. It's just in those situations that's when they need Kyrie Irving the most.
Although they've been winning without him, but that's a topic for another day.
Well, I just want to get back to Jimmy Butler, especially during the Brooklyn Nets game. Yes, he's been their MVP. He's carrying the Heat to victories, but I'm just worried about his shooting. Before that clutch moment in the last 2 minutes of that Brooklyn Nets game, his shooting was it 4 for 13 before those 2 minutes. Like, if he was just scoring efficiently, they wouldn't be in such close situations where they need him to be clutch, which he's been. And it's not, and he does more than just shoot. He contributes great defense. He's a big playmaker, the leading assist. He's the point guard. It's just, I think his shooting struggles is the start of his decline. It's good enough to beat the non-elite teams, but Jimmy Butler's already 30 years old, so that's a little worrying for me.
With all due respect, David, I think you're overreacting.
Yeah,
for a lack of better term. I don't think you have a lot of valid points what you're saying, but I do think that if you think about everything that's going on in his life, so for example, one, he just moved to a new city, to a new team, so one, he has to get acclimated to his new teammate, coach, system. Two, he's in a new city, which happens to be Miami, a great social environment. And when you put yourself as a veteran in a new city where there's lots to do to enjoy yourself, and from his playoff experience, he knows that as long as we win the games, I don't have to really produce that well. I think he understands that at this point in his career, after being paid by the Miami Heat, who put a lot of confidence into his signing, by giving him all that money, that he can do what he wants as long as he win games. I feel that
doing that.
as long as he's been winning, I don't think he's gonna worry too much about his percentage, especially since now he's being more of a playmaker, like you mentioned. He's focusing more on distributing the ball, giving confidence to the younger players, especially all those rookies and younger players that they have. The technically they're still developing, like Bam Adebayo still developing. Got Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson. These are all very young players. They need to build themselves up to get that experience and confidence. And so I think that's the role that he's taking. And I also think that the fact that he just gave birth to his daughter gives him more of an excuse to, focus on other things other than boosting his stats, right? I'm not a professional player, but I would think that that's a pretty big deal. And as a parent, his first daughter, he would put a lot more of his time trying to, get used to being a father. And then so that when the playoff times comes, everything is set and he can just focus on that final playoff push. So I think there's a lot of things to consider. I don't think it's because he's 30. You're making it sound like he's really old. I don't think he's that
He
old.
has a lot of miles on him.
He
He
does,
does.
but he's an extremely he is not a very athletic player, but he's a very solid player. Like he knows his strength, right? He's not gonna beat you just like by outrunning you to the basket, but he has a very good pace to his game, and I think he's just picking his time to really go full blown out when the playoff push starts.
I mean, he did shut down Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry shot 2 for 18.
That was his first game back, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
2 for
Kyle
18
Lowry-
though, man.
Yeah.
2
Kyle
for
Lowry is
18.
very streaky. Sometimes he just cannot score anything. But to his credit, Kyle Lowry is a very scrappy player. Even though he's taking all those shots, he can still contribute. But he can be extremely streaky, man.
Now, not only that, Pascal Siakam also played bad yesterday, and that leads me to another person, which I really like for the Heat and how he's developing so far is Bam Adebayo. He's been playing really well, like defensively. He shut down Pascal Siakam pretty much, single-handedly shut him down. If you were watching the game yesterday, you can tell how frustrated Siakam was yesterday. Like he couldn't score anything. Like he was missing. He airballed wide open, like a little tiny runner. He airballed it. All his shots were also short. Bam was just all over him.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but you had Duncan Robinson was also played well yesterday. The only bad thing, the only bad thing about yesterday's game that I'll just talk about a little bit is Kendrick Nunn. Now I was all in on Kendrick Nunn. I liked him going into the season, but yesterday it just proved to me like, what is this? We're already into 20 games into the season. By now, you should already know what Kendrick Nunn is. And for me, he's the type of player that will play well versus bad teams. He doesn't shoot that well versus
not against good
teams.
Defensive teams.
Yeah, but I don't know if yesterday was just they played good defense on him, because he had a lot of open shots, but he just wasn't making any of them. Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, he, like, especially I think in overtime, he played over Duncan Robinson. I mean, at least, even though his shot wasn't falling, at least he didn't give up on defense. He still hustled. So that's why he was still playing, even though his shot wasn't falling.
Speaking on the defense thing, the only thing that I don't like about him is that he can't keep up with fast guards. Because there was one play where Gasol, it was a high pick and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And they did this every time. And this is not the only time it happened. It's happened before, where the center will come in, they pick him, and Kendrick Nunn cannot keep up with the guard once that guy comes in. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's not strong enough or he just doesn't know how to like run through the pick. He just can't keep up with the guard once there's a high pick and roll. It's like the guard will have an open lane and be able to drive it in, and Kendrick Nunn's going to have to like chase him down, and it just can't work like that. Like I don't know what the Heat are going to do, but they need him to like pick up on that. Yeah, they need him to practice on being able to go through picks, and it's like an easy possession the minute they do that.
I do want to point out that the Raptors are very good at doing the pick and roll. You might want to look at other games as well.
No, other games have done the same thing
against the Raptors.
Yeah,
okay.
any team that does a high pick and roll with Kendrick Nunn on that guard, he cannot keep up with the guard. Like he's okay if there's no pick and roll and it's just like man to man. He can play. He'll be able to keep up with them because he's not super athletic, but he's athletic enough to like keep up with them. But
he's like he got good steal numbers. He could pick your pockets if you're not.
Yeah.
If you're careless.
I think, alluding to what David said, it's something he could practice. If you're saying he can keep up on a one-on-one coverage, that means he's athletic enough to be able to stay on a pick and roll. The problem comes in if he can read the pick and roll and react to it fast enough. And so that's something that I believe he could learn.
He also doesn't have that second gear. Like the minute if you're trailing behind that guy, you just want to like sprint to him. He doesn't have that. But he's athletic enough.
I just also want to talk about defense of Bam Adebayo. I like this trend of him like guarding the best player. I want to talk a little bit about the Houston Rocket loss in that they start the game having Bam Adebayo guarding Russell Westbrook. That
Wow.
was a very interesting play.
That's so unexpected.
He was
Yeah.
keeping up with him.
Yeah. I mean, no, we mentioned last week for that Rocket game, they should just let Russell Westbrook take over, like let him do his thing, but just try to contain Harden. Unfortunately, they let Westbrook do his thing, but he was making all his long twos in his mid range, which is unfortunate. I mean, against the Spurs, he shot 7 out of 30, but against the Heat, he was making all those mid range. It was a you want him shooting the long twos, but it was just annoying seeing him make it. And then they just couldn't contain James Harden. James Harden and Russell Westbrook both had great games against the Heat. And I would say that was the downfall.
I'm not that surprised about that. I mean, I didn't think they're gonna win that game, but they did finish 3-1 right now.
Yeah.
They're playing again today against Boston in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
They're probably
good
gonna
game.
they'll probably lose today though, but and 3-2, that's fine.
Right, against the losses come against really good opponents.
Yeah,
On the
and
road.
it's also it's just bad luck for them because they have yet to win a back-to-back yet. They can't win the second game during a back-to-back. They've lost everything.
The teams they face on the back-to-back are really tough teams. Though.
Brutal teams, man.
Yep. I mean, they lost to the Lakers. Who else? They lost to
76ers.
76ers on the back. It's just hard for them to win that.
Yeah. That's hard for any team, really.
And they did beat the Raptors in Toronto.
Yes.
And this little 2 back-to-back could have been 2 losses. And they got a really good win over a good team. So, you can take that any day, man.
Still, but it was even more impressive about the Raptors win was Goran Dragic was out of that game.
Yes. Justice Winslow played really well too.
Oh yeah, he had a
He
I would say
well.
best game of the season so far.
Better than his first game was pretty good.
But like he was impactful on both defense and offense.
Oh yes, he was. Those 3 people like Winslow, Bam Adebayo, and Butler, those are such good defensive unit right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're top 5 easily. They can almost shut down everybody. But I mean, after they play Boston, the next 3 games are going to be cakewalks because they're all home games, and it's against the Wizards, Bulls, and Hawks.
Nice.
So after today's loss, they'll probably win the next 3, and then they're going to lose because they play the Lakers. But the Lakers, they have a shot. They have a shot against the Lakers because the Lakers is also a home game, and they play the Lakers on a Friday. So if the Lakers come in early, like on Thursday, they'll probably go out. Most likely they'll go out. We probably have that the South Beach fever.
Yeah. Well, speaking of losses, doesn't look good for them against Boston tonight because Goran Dragic is not going to play. He's still out with his injury. And also, Eric Spoelstra is also not going to be
He's
in
not
the
going to
game.
be out. He has
Really?
a daughter.
What's
His
wrong?
daughter, a daughter is being.
Okay.
Right? I think his daughter.
I'm seeing second son, another son. Yeah, I don't think they're going to win tonight against Boston.
The Heat usually have a very good string of assistant coaches ready to take the job. Although
like
most
the
of
Knicks
them,
coach.
the Knicks coach, Juwan Howard.
Speaking of
Stan Van Gundy.
Juwan Howard because he's a coach for Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Undefeated.
They're undefeated and they beat 2 seeded teams already, number 6 and number 8, and they are unseeded.
That's the thing with the Heat, man. Like they know how to develop talent, and that's straight up and down, not just players, but staff, coaches. They really have a good system there. It'll be interesting to see if that'll still be in place once. I hate to say it, but Pat Riley's pretty old. He's probably looking to retire soon. Yeah, the Heat really do put out really good coaches, staff, players. They really squeeze all the talent out of everyone. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Juwan Howard's doing so well in college.
One more shout out to Duncan Robinson. Great game last night, but he has 58 made threes for the entire season, which places him 13th in the league so far, just behind Kemba Walker and just ahead of Joe Harris. It was a big shout out for him.
44% from 3-point.
Yeah,
I like him. I like how he turned out so far, Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, and like he's not just a one-dimensional player. Like he doesn't just only shoot threes. Like he can still take it in and he drives it in. So it's massively impressed by him.
He does play defense a little bit.
Yes, and he plays defense.
Not really good at it, but he
But
tries.
He tries, and he needs to cut
Tries.
down the fouls, but
Yeah,
he's still learning.
He is a rookie, kind of. Anyways, anything else you guys want to add?
Just want to add another shout out to Markelle Fultz. I mentioned the career high, but it's good to see him playing more minutes too. At the beginning of the season, he was on a minute restriction. I think he was on like a 20 to 24 minute restriction, but now lately he's been playing into 30 or more minutes, so that's encouraging to see.
He's definitely doing beyond expectations, at least my expectations.
Mine too. And like it really seemed like when he becomes a restricted free agent in 2021, it seems like the Magic will most likely throw a max contract his way.
Well, let's just we'll talk about that another time, okay?
Yes.
But anyways, that's it for the Heat and Magic Assist podcast. Good night, everybody.